Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And listen, the power that we're going to talk about today is how our thoughts have the ability to affect our physical expression of who we are, sickness and all. We're going to dive into all of this. It's so fun. And it's a great way just to be able to start to think about the way that you think about being sick. Before we jump into the episode, if you're joining us for the first time, or if you haven't joined us for a while, you'll see that the structure or the format of the podcast is different. This is season 3, and so we're moving into something that's a little bit more free form, where in season 1 and season 2, we were following a storyline. We were following the storyline of when I was 15 and pregnant, and, went through so much of a story inside of all that I experienced, and being able to hold space for that young girl. We held space for all of us and the things that we experience in life. And then in season 2, we walked through my husband's side of us coming together and different things that he experienced that brought him into being the person that he is today, and how we ended up coming together, and that story, and figuring out how to navigate, finding answers in our life and all of those things. So great to have a structure. And now it's so great to not have a structure and to be able to talk about whatever we want to talk about, whatever comes to mind. And I love last week that we did the whole Hey Mish thing, where you are able to write in your thoughts and things that you're thinking about or that you might have questions about. It's so great. I love that structure. It's probably my most favorite. I love being able to address you. So if you have a Hey Mish, if you have a quandary or a question or something that's kind of coming up for you that you're just looking for information around you about, and it has to do with the things that we talk about on the podcast, then I would really encourage you to reach out. You can reach out in so many ways. Essentially, you can email me. So get the email written down, hello@myfriendmisha.com. It's crazy easy. The way you spell Misha is Mesha. And you can send me something that you want me to read on the podcast there, or you can also send me a voice note there. And I'll include it, and then I'll answer it. I'll include it on the podcast, and then I'll talk about the topic of the things that you are bringing up. Oh, I love that. So please send them in. I would love to hear from you. And without further ado, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is wrapping our mind around how much our thoughts have to do with sickness, with us getting sick. Let's jump in. All right, my friend, we are going to take a little look at our thoughts and our immune system, our vibration, and the way that affects whether or not we get sick. I want to start the episode by asking you, do you ever say to yourself, whatever's going around, I'll probably catch it? Do you distance yourself from people who are sick? Do you give that arm's length, I'm not going to hug you. You're coughing. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how your thoughts are and how it really affects the outcome of you getting sick or staying well. So I want to go back to about a month ago. Jake and I were sitting at dinner together, and he asked me, he said, so Mish, do you think that every single time that you get sick, it means that you have a low vibration? Essentially, sort of the thought process, if I don't meditate, or if I don't stay on top of keeping my feelings high, my emotions high, my consciousness level high, then am I subject to getting sick? And this is the way that I answered Jake. And trust me, I know I don't know everything. Literally 5 years ago, I would have said wow, I don't even know what you're talking about. But this is how I said it. This is what I talked to him about. I said, there's so many things that actually can weaken your immune system. We know that, right? We know that if you have poor nutrition and you have a lack of vitamins and so forth running through your body, and you are exposed to something, then you might have higher chances of getting sick. If you don't have enough rest, if you're being so busy and you're stressed and you're overwhelmed, a lot of times we crash and we get sick. If we don't have a lot of movement, if we have a lack of exercise in our life, sometimes, or hydration or whatever that is, that kind of is in conjunction with nutrition as well. But when we have a lack of movement, we can get sick very easily. So there's also this level of our emotions, our thoughts, our things that we expose ourselves to around us and the way that they affect our vibration. And if our vibration dips and gets really low, what are your thoughts? Do you think we're more susceptible? It's so cool for me to really break it down and to try to understand what I've learned this far in my life, the things that I've seen around me, and to be able to, go like, okay, well, what do I believe right now? What do I believe at this point in my life? You might have heard that negative thoughts can lower your immune system. Maybe you've heard that laughing ups your immune system by, a certain percent that they're going to throw out there and tell you. So I love kind of taking these things apart. And I remember one time about 5 years ago, I was talking to an energy healer and I was getting really curious about the work that he does and how he does it and stuff like that. And I was asking a lot of questions. And I remember that he told me that anytime that someone is impaired physically, that he believes that they're vexed. And I went, what are you talking about vexed? Are you talking about vexed with other entities? Are you talking about vexed and so I was just really, really taken back by this idea, right? So I looked up the definition of vexed today to kind of give you an idea, some construct to work from. Here's the definition. Vexed is irritated, distressed, or annoyed, persistently unresolved or much debated, annoyed, harassed, or troubled. Vexed. So think about that. It's really interesting to think about the relationship between what is happening to us on an internal level, in other words, mentally, inside of our thoughts, inside of our beliefs, even what we hold subconsciously, and the way that different physical ailments manifest. And if we're cleared of those things, then what might be the alternative? It's a really great thing to just stop and take a mindset check around. So here's a couple of the things that we listed when we were sitting at the dinner table, because it's really beautiful to be able to look around you at things that you've witnessed, things that you have learned, things that you kind of know to support or disprove the things that you're thinking about. So there's a guy named Wim Hof. We talked about Wim Hof. And Wim Hof, if you don't know, is the Iceman. He's the guy that is, kind of leading out in the ice bath arena, and he has been doing this for years and years. And he essentially did an experiment where professionals in a hospital setting placed endotoxins inside of his bloodstream. And that is something that would make you feel the effects. It's like bacteria, right, in your body. Within 2 hours, you're going to be feeling wildly sick. You might be shaking from fever. You might be having all of these different ways that it's manifesting. So he does this experiment, and he's so endearing. He's got the greatest accent. He's seriously so cute. And he does this experiment where that's injected inside of his body. And the moment that it's injected, he starts his breathing. And he starts taking control over his internal environment, And these are things that he has been practicing. He's been practicing the ability to control his internal environment, regardless of his external environment, or even something that is placed into his internal environment that's foreign. Wild. Okay, so the results were that Wim Hof did not get sick. So they were like, that's amazing. Like, what in the world, is that about? But it's still not provable because we need to do this on more people to have more data. And so Wim Hof got 12 people together and he kind of put them through like Wim Hof training, right? So they did a lot of different things like, cold plunges, laying on the snow, I don't know, just things that like helped them to be able to master their internal environment, learning breath, learning, that presence. And once they were ready, after they'd been spending a week with Wim Hof, they went into the lab and they injected endotoxins into all of their bloodstreams. And they found that all of them were able to maintain this state internally to where the endotoxins did not like alter their state and it passed through them. Oh, so cool, right? So now we start to get, so Jake and I are sitting there, we're like, well, we know Wim Hof, we know his, research and the things that he's been able to prove and to show around what he has been able to do and teach other people to do, which is where you really, really find the evidence. And then we know of Dispenza. We know Dr. Joe Dispenza, he does tons of stuff, which is just wildly interesting to me and I think beneficial for our society as a whole to be able to see the gains and the wins that he's able to experience inside of the work that he does. But they did something called, they did a reporting on an experiment that they did called Evidence is the Loudest Voice, if you want to look it up. And it was around, when COVID was heavy and strong, but they were still able to come back into doing like meditation retreats or whatever. So what they did is they took someone who had been meditating, and multiple people, I should say, who had been meditating for the entire week. They took their blood and they put it in a petri dish. They also put COVID in the petri dish, and they were able to see that COVID wasn't able to attach to the blood. Okay. The environment that was being created in the blood was repelling the COVID. So cool. And they were able to prove it, like not just on a one-person scale, like multiple people, right? And they had actually very large, I don't remember the universities that came in to do this study to help, facilitate this, but it's there if you want to like kind of look into it and it piques your interest. It's just being able to prove that there is an element about us keeping our state in a certain way so that outside influences or foreign things that come into our realm of possibility don't alter, affect us, or, essentially make us fall. It's so interesting. The other thing I really want you to think about is that when someone is sick and they're not doing well, and you keep their spirits high, like what that does for them. Have you ever seen a situation where somebody was able to turn the corner or improve or whatever when their spirits were high? So Jake and I were talking about his mom and about how she finally turned the corner with COVID once she started focusing all that she was grateful for. Her family, everything that she had, like her thoughts changed and she started improving. And that was to us like no surprise because we did that on purpose. We tried to walk her through that on purpose. And that is when she started making improvements. And she'll say that was for her access to turning the corner. Whoa. So really starting to see that our thoughts, our mental state has a bearing on what happens to us physically. So there's a book called Letting Go, and I think this is one of the most fantastic books that I've ever read. So I highly recommend it if you've never heard of it. It's by Dr. David Hawkins, and he allows us to see, by showing us different experiments and different things that he collects in the book, that when we think of something, in other words, like a cold, as catchable, that it's contagious, that what we're doing when we ascribe to that is we are experiencing a state of fear, a level or a vibration, okay? In the book, he says that everything in the universe has a vibration, and that vibration has a strengthening or a weakening effect, right, on us. He also says that the basic dictum to comprehend is that the body obeys the mind. Therefore, the body tends to manifest what the mind believes. The belief may be held consciously or unconsciously. This dictum follows the law of consciousness that states we are only subject to what we hold in mind. The only power that anything has over us is the power of belief that we give it. By power, we mean energy and the will to believe. This book is fascinating. I could read you so many excerpts from this book. But the idea is that when we are functioning as we go through our life, when our vibration dips, in other words, when we are exposed to a negative thought, a belief, whether conscious or unconscious, things that are outside of us that can affect us in those ways, that we become more susceptible. In other words, that dip is a compromise in our immune system. Okay, so just the idea that someone else has a cold that's catchable, or just the idea that we say, oh, something's going around, I'm probably going to get sick, or I catch everything, or that kind of a disease runs in my family. Those thoughts you're holding in mind, and what you hold in mind tends to manifest. Not only does it tend to manifest, because there's a lot of power in our belief and what we believe, but if it's a negative thought, then it's going to cause our immune system to dip. And then we are going to be subject to that dip in our immune system. This is another quote from the book. He says, thought is powerful because it has a high rate of vibration. A thought is actually a thing. It has energy pattern. The more energy we give it, the more power it has to manifest itself physically. Another finding that he talks about in the book that I think is so wildly cool is he talks about a meditation practice, an experiment that was done. It was a study that followed students who participated faithfully in a 6-week meditation training. There were half of them that went ahead and did the meditation as they were learning about it, and the other half didn't do the meditation. Essentially, they were the control group who received only information. And they found after 6 weeks that the immune system of the people who actually meditated was heightened, was strengthened, was improved versus the ones who just learned about the meditation. You know, and this is what kind of lends an ear to the idea that when we meditate, we're actually elevating our vibration. It's one of the things, you know, especially in my belief, that when we get into heart coherence, when we're in meditation, that it makes us wildly jump high in our vibration. So there's lots of things that we can do. We can laugh with a friend. We can, you know, take care of our body. We can do like physical exercise. We can stimulate our minds. There's so many great things that actually elevate our vibration. Maybe we're, you know, exposed to something beautiful that we see. We either witness it live or we're watching a movie or a video about the world and how beautiful it is. Like those bubbles that I just saw frozen in a lake in Alberta, Canada. Holy cow. Literally amazing. And all of those things can elevate our vibration. But essentially, the idea that I hold and that he's basically stating is that when we're in meditation, and like I said, what I hold is like when we are in heart coherence in meditation, that we not only take little steps up, but we jump our vibration like crazy. It's beautiful. And when we do that, we strengthen our immune system. When we have a thought that says, okay, people are sick and my body is strong and I expect to have good health and I am giving my body everything that it needs to, you know, succeed or whatever, like the opposite of the disparaging, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get it. Everybody's sick around me. Like, oh, it's going around. You know what I mean? And so the point of my proposition for you today is to really just be able to take a look at how your thoughts actually really do affect your physical nature, and how much when we hold in mind a belief, how it can manifest. And it can manifest in our life in so many ways. And sickness is just a really beautiful access point to be able to see, right, how that happens. So essentially, when something is going around, you would find a lot more value in trying to keep your vibration high. Maybe there's certain things that you take to keep your immune system high. Like I always like to take 50,000 IUs of D3 because that's been proven to give your immune system a boost. And yes, I said 50 as in 50,000 IUs. You can do your own research on that. I'm just sharing that that's what I do. And I tap into making sure that I'm meditating, making sure that I'm staying in heart coherence and keeping that vibration lifted, keeping myself high and my thoughts well, right? Now, if you go and you do all of those things and you still dip, I think it's important for us to just recognize that sometimes we're going to be experiencing sickness no matter what we do, and that our bodies sometimes are manifesting that we need to rest. Sometimes we're so busy and we haven't given ourselves a chance to rest, and so our body protests and says, okay, well, guess what? You're not going to have any other option but to rest. So there's all different avenues and things that we can think about, when we do fall sick anyway. And it's more important to support your body and to love your body through it versus beating yourself up about like, oh, dang it. Like I got sick, even though like I'm trying to keep my vibration high, whatever kind of thoughts you end up having. And I'm actually doing this episode on the hills of being sick last week, and I was out for like a good 3 days. And so I feel like I'm doing that to also say me too with you, because it's not like I'm giving you this information and saying, here's how to just be above it. I am recognizing that we're all human, and I love doing it on the hills of having been sick, but also seeing the ways that I was able to take care of my body and really love my body and say, what is it that you need? Let's take that detox bath. Let's really hydrate. Let's, get into the state where we're making sure that we're meditating. And here's the trouble. The trouble is in the first couple days, like I was so sick that it's like you can't even like really take care of yourself. You don't even want to get up to get water, right? But then as I started to improve, I was able to be like, oh yeah, remember all the rituals and the things that, all the vitamin and the structure, the things that I like to do that help really lift me, and including meditation and staying in that space. But another thing that's really important to me is that when you get sick, that you spend time intentionally listening. Like you are down and out. Most of the time when you're sick, you can't even you're kind of in a fog where reading wouldn't even make sense, and it would actually kind of hurt your eyes to try, And I think it's important to make sure that you spend time just listening to see if there's any messages that you might be missing with the busyness of regular life. I think that that's a very valuable thing, because there's been times where I know I've been sick for a specific purpose because I needed to hear some messages, and so sometimes there's that. And sometimes it's just, you fell prey to what was in the air. And that's just sometimes the way that it is. But it's really important to understand that you do have more power than we give ourselves credit. Yes, we're human, and yes, we're going to get sick, but it's really important to recognize that if you're a person who thinks like, oh, I get everything, or stay away from me, and you kind of shun other people that have, sickness or whatever. And sure, there's wisdom. There's wisdom. Like if you're about to go on a trip, you might not want to hang out with the person, and you might want to graciously love them. But careful that your thought doesn't dip into the negativity or in placing them in that camp of a leper. You know what I mean? Because that's energy. That is energy. So within that, there are so many more things that I could say, but essentially I wanted to help you start to rearrange your thoughts around making sure that you're really looking at the idea that if our thoughts can affect our immune system, if they can weaken it or strengthen it, and if we have enough proof around that, then it really makes sense for us to try. It makes sense for us to try to keep our thoughts elevated, to keep our thoughts in the arena of being on that positive swing where we're staying in love, joy, happiness, not in fear, not in anxiety, not in, any of those negative feelings towards the sickness that's essentially going around, because a lot of people are susceptible to it. Their vibration is low. And so lots of people are falling sick. But it's great for you to say, I'm giving my body everything that I can. You know what I'm saying? And then I just wanted to give a little bit of a nod to something that might be beyond the seasonal flu or seasonal colds or things like that. That if you're experiencing something that's more of a chronic illness or a disease or things like that, I want to just speak to that for a moment, because I think that if that were me, I would surround myself with people who have healed from possibly the same thing that I was going through, or who have had wild transformation stories of healing. And I would do a lot of research, right? So this book, Letting Go, talks a lot about the idea that our thoughts play such an instrumental role in helping us be well. So here's a quote that says, "There's an emotional, psychological component in all diseases, and because of this, it is possible to reverse the disease process by removing the internal stress factors." There's so much depth to dive into, and when you're diving into these things, I want you to make sure that you're very careful that you don't fall into a camp that's negative about belief. In other words, so I must be messed up if I'm showing physical signs of illness, or if I have chronic things that are going on for me, or even like mental situations. These are all, it's all a conglomerate. They all work together. And if you fall or dip into criticism towards yourself about your state, then period, you're falling into that low level vibration. So make sure that as you're doing the research, that you're saying, I'm learning more every day. I'm applying myself, and I'm being enlightened by all of the things that I'm surrounding myself with. And you're giving your space love and respect and all of those things for not having known in the past, right? Like, now I know different, and so I can do better. That's such a beautiful thing. I love that he says in summary, after a couple of chapters of really talking about the relationship between the mind and the body and be thy own physician and healing thyself, he says, the way to change our bodies is to change our thoughts and feelings. We must let go of negative thoughts and belief systems and shed the stress of negative emotions that give them energy. We have to cancel the negative programming that comes from the world as well as from our own belief system. So I would surround myself with things that talk about possibility, that talk about like transformation. I talked about Joe Dispenza a little bit earlier, and on his website, he has an entire portion of his website that talks about transformation stories, people who have been able to tap into the energy that is created when you create heart coherence, because this is something that creates an energy field around your body from 3 to 10 feet around your body. And you can use that energy to also allow your cells to be benefited. In other words, you're upregulating your cells instead of downregulating them as we age and as we are sick and all of the things. And so I would do a ton of research around that and the work that he's doing. I would dive into my own stories of religious healings. I would dive into, there's a documentary called Heal that I think that might even be the very first place where I discovered Joe Dispenza. I'm not entirely sure, but it kind of talks about all of these really wild, healings and the things that are possible. And when you start to learn about all of these things in the different arenas and you combine the things that your heart is telling you to combine, I think there's wild possibilities for miracles and amazing things to happen in your life. So I wanted to breathe that in as a possibility and as a mindset check for you to be able to see that your thoughts play such an important role on how you show up physically in this world. And I want to leave you with the idea and the thought that whatever that is not, even though it's your thought and it's happening inside of you, you didn't know better. There were thoughts that you're past, even in your own DNA and the way that your own setup and structure works from what you were given from your parents, okay? Both in what you were given in the DNA and also what you were given subconsciously, what you observed when you were young, from the world around you and all of the things. And sometimes I also think that we take on, there's a lot of people who I've learned are empaths, and they take on the energy of other people and the things that are happening around them. And then those things are internalized, and their feelings and they're things that they don't even ever belong to us. But sometimes we take them on, and then we wear them like a great big heavy coat, or even more than that, it's internal, inside of us, right? And then it's wild to me that because we don't know better how to release those things, that then they show up in our body. And it's such an interesting thing for me. It's like piques my interest so much to be able to research this and the way that this happens in life. And I really am just a girl for possibility. And it's happening all around you. It just depends on what you tune into and try to listen to. So I want to leave you with that and hopefully help you see that with your thoughts, you have more power than you think you do to show up physically in this world. All right, I hope you loved that episode today. I hope that it gave you something, or maybe lots of things to think about, and maybe an access point to start researching and looking for things yourself. If you think this episode would be helpful for someone in your life, please share it with them. That would also help the podcast grow, and I would appreciate that. Don't forget to go ahead and rate and review the podcast, because that also helps us as the season is brand new to kind of get suggested more and grow so that we can help more and more people. And one more thing that I want to offer, I want to just see if you would love it. And if you want it, then I'll make it for you. But this is an idea that I have, is if I made a meditation that you could use while you were sick to help you remind yourself of your body's capability to heal, right? In a meditative sense. So if that's something that you feel like you would benefit from, then just let me know. You know, even one person letting me know, I'm going to say, let's do it. Let's do it. And I'll make it available to you probably through YouTube, or I don't really know yet, but it's something that I kind of have on the edge of my mind, you know, like in my heart. And if it's needed and wanted, then I would love to create that as a space for you to remind yourself, right? And sit in the affirmation around what you are capable of. As we conclude, I want to leave you with some thoughts from Joe Dispenza. He talks a lot about how our thoughts can create dis-ease or disease in our body. And he says that if your thoughts can make you sick, then your thoughts can also make you well. Until next time, my friend.